Hey everyone. I do not even know how to start this. Honestly, I am losing sleep over what went down recently, and I need to get it off my chest before I spiral any further. This all kicked off just a few nights ago. Amanda said she was heading over to her sister Megan's place for one of their classic girls' nights. Nothing strange about that. They have always been inseparable. Megan had a baby not too long ago, so Amanda's been running over there a lot lately to lend a hand. It is not like this was her first time leaving late and saying she would probably spend the night there. That night, I stuck to my usual routine. Unlike Amanda, I am no night owl. By the time the clock hit 10, I was already dozing off on the couch, halfway through some forgettable late-night show. Then, at around 11:30, I stirred awake. A sound caught my ear. Laughter. And not just any laughter. It was Amanda's laugh. You know that laugh your partner has? The one you could pick out of a crowd blindfolded? Amanda's laugh is like that. It starts soft, almost like she is holding back, then grows louder until it turns into this contagious, cascading melody. It is unforgettable. And that night I heard it, clear as day. Here is the weird part. The sound was coming from outside. More specifically, from Jackson's backyard. Jackson is the guy who lives next door. He moved in a couple of years back after his messy divorce. A decent guy overall, always friendly, always waving when he sees you. He even fixed our busted fence once without us asking. He and Amanda got along well, but I chalked it up to her being naturally outgoing. She has that kind of personality. Still half asleep, I shuffled to the window and peeked through the blinds. Sure enough, I spotted two figures near Jackson's fire pit. The flames were low, and the shadows danced, but it was too dark to make out their faces. One of them was definitely laughing. I told myself I had to be imagining things. Maybe the sound carried over from a TV show or a conversation from another yard. But the thought burrowed into my brain and would not let go. That was Amanda. Feeling uneasy, I grabbed my phone and called Megan. She answered after a few rings, her voice groggy and thick with sleep. Hey, Brian. Everything okay? Yeah. Sorry to wake you, I said, trying to sound casual. Is Amanda with you? There was a pause. Yeah, she's here. Why? Can I talk to her? I heard muffled sounds as she passed the phone. Then Amanda's voice, sleepy and irritated, came through the line. Brian? What is going on? It is late. I froze. The voice on the phone sounded groggy, like she had just woken up, like she really had been at Megan's house this whole time. But I was so sure I had heard her outside, laughing in Jackson's yard. I just wanted to check in. I mumbled, my heart racing. Everything is fine, she said, her tone softening. Get some sleep. I will be home tomorrow. I hung up and should have felt better. She was where she said she would be, right? But instead of relief, I felt this deep, crawling unease. How could she be at Megan's house when I was so certain I heard her outside? Was I losing my grip? I spent the rest of the night glued to the window, watching Jackson's backyard. Eventually, the fire fizzled out, and the two figures disappeared into his house. I did not sleep at all. The next day, Amanda came home like nothing had happened. She was her usual cheerful self. She even made a joke about how wiped she was from staying up late with Megan. I wanted so badly to ask, were you at Jackson's last night? But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I just nodded along and tried to play it cool. The whole week after that felt like a blur. Amanda seemed perfectly normal, maybe even more affectionate than usual. But I could not stop thinking about those shadows by the fire pit. Then last night, she mentioned another girl's night at Megan's. I told myself to stay calm and not jump to conclusions. But as she was getting ready to leave, I asked almost casually, you and Jackson seem pretty close, huh? She hesitated for just a second, barely a flicker, but it was enough. I guess. Why? Just curious, I said, forcing a smile. She kissed me on the cheek and left. Now it is quiet. Jackson's backyard is dark. But I cannot shake the feeling that something is about to happen. Is it all in my head? Am I reading too much into this? Or is Amanda hiding something from me? I cannot stop replaying that laugh in my mind. It is like an itch I cannot scratch, and I have no idea what to do next. It was around 11 p.m. when I heard it again. Rebecca's laugh. But this time, it wasn't coming from Will's yard. It was coming from the direction of his house. I sat up, every nerve in my body on edge. Our bedroom window was cracked open, and the sound drifted in faintly. Late at night, every noise seems amplified. I followed the sound, moving quietly, my heart pounding in my ears. Listening more closely, I could hear Rebecca's laughter again against the background of a voice I didn't recognize. That's when I decided to call Violet again. I needed to hear her say Rebecca was with her. As the phone rang, I froze. A ringtone, it was faintly echoing from Will's house. The voices in Will's house went silent, and as Violet answered my call, the sound of the ringtone coming from Will's house through the open window also stopped. My blood ran cold. "Sam?" Violet answered, her voice groggy. "Hey, sorry to bother you so late," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Is Rebecca with you?" "Of course she is," Violet replied, the same calm assurance as before. "She's asleep in the guest room. Do you want me to wake her?" "No, that's okay," I said, my voice tightening. "Thanks." I hung up quickly, my head spinning. Why was Violet lying for Rebecca? And more importantly, why did the ringtone stop playing as soon as Violet answered the phone? I couldn't sit with the uncertainty anymore. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside. My feet carried me to Will's front door before I even realized what I was doing. My hands were shaking as I knocked. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, I heard the unmistakable sound of hushed voices and footsteps on the other side of the door. When it finally opened, Will stood there, looking surprised, and not the good kind. "Sam," he said, forcing a smile. "It's late. What's going on?" "I need to talk to Rebecca," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Will hesitated, his body blocking the doorway. "She's not here," he said quickly. "You should probably head home and—" "Move," I said, my voice hardening. Something in my tone must have told him I wasn't going to back down. He stepped aside reluctantly, and that's when I saw them. Rebecca and Violet were sitting on the couch, their expressions a mix of shock and guilt. They weren't dressed for a casual girls' night. Both were in the kind of attire that left little to the imagination. Heels, tight dresses, makeup that looked hastily reapplied. My heart felt like it had stopped. I stared at them, then at Will, and then back at them. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, my voice breaking. Rebecca was the first to speak. "Sam, it's not what it looks like." "Don't!" I snapped. "Don't even try to lie. You told me you were at Violet's. You told me you were asleep in the guest room. And now I find you here, dressed like this? Violet, you too? What are you both doing here?" Violet looked away, her face flushed with embarrassment. Rebecca opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. It hit me all at once. The late-night laughter, the lies, the shared glances I'd dismissed as sisterly closeness. They weren't just cheating, they were doing it together. "You've both been with him," I said, the realization choking me. "Haven't you?" Neither of them answered, but their silence said it all. Will finally stepped forward, his voice defensive. "Look, Sam, I didn't mean for this to happen. It's complicated, okay? You don't understand." "Don't you dare," I interrupted, my voice trembling with rage. "You don't get to explain this. You don't get to justify what you've done." I turned back to Rebecca, my voice breaking. 8 years, Rebecca. 8 years of marriage. And this is what you do? With him? With my neighbor? And Violet, you were supposed to be her sister. My friend. How could you do this?" Rebecca started crying, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. I couldn't even look at her. I left without another word. I didn't slam the door or shout or make a scene. I just walked out, my chest hollow and my head spinning. Part of me still can't believe this is real. How do you even begin to process something like this? All I know is the life I thought I had is gone, and I don't think I can ever get it back. It was close to 11 that night when I heard it again, Amanda's laugh. This time, though, it was not floating up from Jackson's yard. It was coming from inside his house. I bolted upright in bed, every hair on my body standing on end. The window was slightly cracked, and the sound carried easily through the quiet night. Late at night, every small noise feels magnified, like the universe is trying to get your attention. I strained to listen, heart racing. Amanda's laugh cut through the air again, this time mingling with a voice I could not place. The room seemed to tilt. My stomach churned. Desperate for clarity, I grabbed my phone and dialed Megan. She answered after a couple of rings, her voice groggy and thick with sleep. "Hello." "Hey, Megan," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though my hands were trembling. "Is Amanda with you?" "Of course she is," Megan replied without hesitation. "She's asleep in the guest room. Wanted to wake her?" "No," I said quickly, cutting her off. "That's okay. Sorry for bothering you so late." I ended the call, but did not move. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The sound of Amanda's laugh played on a loop in my head, amplified by the unmistakable echo of a ringtone I had heard just moments before. Amanda's ringtone, coming from inside Jackson's house. The voices had gone silent the moment the ringtone stopped, as though someone inside had muted the world to avoid being caught. I sat frozen for what felt like hours, torn between denial and anger. Eventually, my legs moved of their own accord, carrying me down the stairs and out the door. The night air was cold, biting through my thin jacket. Before I realized it, I was standing at Jackson's front door. My fists were clenched, my knuckles white. I knocked, the sound reverberating louder than I intended. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then I heard it, hushed voices, shuffling footsteps. The door creaked open, and there he was, Jackson, looking startled and anything but welcoming. "Brian," he said, plastering on a weak smile. "It's late. What's up?" "I need to talk to Amanda," I said, my voice sharper than I expected. He blinked, his body stiff in the doorway. "She's not here, man. You should head back home." "It's move." My voice came out cold, edged with something I barely recognized as my own. He hesitated, then reluctantly stepped aside. The sight that greeted me felt like a gut punch. Amanda and Megan were sitting on the couch, their faces pale with shock and guilt. They were not in sweats or casual lounge clothes for a night in. They were dolled up, tight dresses, towering heels, and makeup that looked hastily retouched. The room spun around me. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, my voice breaking under the weight of disbelief. Amanda was the first to respond, her voice shaky. "Brian, it is not what it looks like." "Don't," I snapped, cutting her off. "Don't you dare try to spin this. You told me you were at Megan's. You told me you were asleep in the guest room. And now I find you here, dressed like that? Megan, you too? What are you even doing here?" Megan looked away, her face flushing crimson. Amanda opened her mouth as if to explain, but no words came out. And then it hit me like a freight train. The late-night laughter, the lies, the subtle exchanges between them I had dismissed as harmless sisterly affection. The truth was glaring, undeniable, and soul-crushing. "You've both been with him," I said, the realization turning my voice into a rasp. "Haven't you?" The silence that followed was deafening. Neither of them spoke, but their downcast eyes were answer enough. Jackson stepped forward, his tone defensive. "Look, Brian, I did not mean for this to happen. It's complicated. You would not understand." "Shut up," I said, my voice trembling with fury. "You don't get to explain this. You don't get to make excuses for what you've done." I turned to Amanda, my voice breaking as the anger gave way to heartbreak. 8 years, Amanda. 8 years of marriage. And this? With him? My neighbor? And you, Megan. You were her sister. My friend. How could you betray me like this? Amanda started crying, but the sight of her tears only deepened the ache in my chest. I could not comfort her. I could not even look at her. I walked out without another word. No slamming doors. No dramatic gestures. Just a slow, hollow retreat into the night. Now I sit here in the dark, trying to piece together what went wrong. How do you even begin to process a betrayal like this? Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, my friends, it is gone, and I do not know if I will ever get it back. Amanda stepped inside like someone testing the waters of a frozen lake. She clung to her coat, her knuckles white against the fabric, her face streaked with dried tears. The air between us was heavy, thick with the unspoken. I didn't move, didn't offer her a seat. Instead, I stood in the middle of the room, arms crossed like a shield, my emotions a tangled storm of anger and exhaustion. "Speak," I said, my voice sharp enough to cut. "No more excuses, Amanda. No more lies. Just the truth." She nodded, her lips trembling as she drew a shaky breath. Her eyes were puffy, red-rimmed, and she looked worn down. Regret was etched into every line of her face, but it felt hollow. Was she sorry for what she did, or simply because she'd been caught? "Brian, I messed up," she began, her voice breaking. "I've made mistakes, more than I can even explain. I'm so sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know I mean it. Sorry." I spat the word like venom. Sorry doesn't even begin to cover it. "You betrayed me, Amanda. Not just with Jackson, but with Josh too. What were you even thinking?" Her eyes widened, a flicker of genuine surprise breaking through her mask of guilt. "Josh!" I folded my arms tighter, my body a fortress against her shock. "Don't pretend you don't know. Mark showed me everything. The texts, the pictures. I know." Amanda's hand flew to her mouth, her expression shifting from surprise to horror. "Mark knows? That's what matters to you." I snapped, bitterness dripping from every word. "Mark? What about me? What about our life? Our marriage?" She staggered back a step, and then sank onto the couch as though her legs could no longer hold her. She looked small, crumpled, but I refused to feel pity. "Brian, I never wanted this to happen," she said, her voice a trembling whisper. "It just got out of control. I wasn't thinking straight." "That's not an explanation," I shot back, my tone as cold as the room had become. "That's an excuse. Start at the beginning. Why?" Her hands twisted together in her lap, her gaze locked on them as though they held the answers. She avoided my eyes for what felt like an eternity before finally speaking, her voice barely audible. "I don't know how to make you understand," she said, "but I guess I felt like something was missing." "Missing?" I repeated, my disbelief simmering beneath the surface. She looked up then, her eyes full of a sorrow I hadn't expected. "Have you ever felt like no matter how good things are, there's this emptiness? Like you're always wondering if there's something else, something more out there?" I said nothing, letting the silence push her to continue. When I tried something different, it felt like I was filling that void," she said, her voice trembling. "I wasn't trying to hurt you, Brian. I wasn't even looking to replace you. I just needed something new." Her words landed like blows, each one heavier than the last. I stood frozen, my mind reeling. How could she say this? How could she justify this destruction of everything we'd built? "I know how this sounds," she continued, her voice growing steadier. "And I know it makes me selfish. But it wasn't about not loving you. I do love you. I don't know how to explain it better than that." I stared at her, the weight of her confession pressing down on me. "Selfish doesn't even begin to describe it," I said, my voice cold. "Amanda, this is catastrophic." Her shoulders slumped, and the room fell silent. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the stillness, each second stretching into an eternity. In that moment, I realized something. The woman sitting before me was not the same woman I thought I'd married. Or maybe she was, and I had just been blind to the truth. "You made your choices," I said finally, my voice low but firm. "You chose Jackson. You chose Josh. And now, I'm choosing myself. I deserve better than this." "Brian, please," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "Don't do this. Don't give up on us." I shook my head, the weight of years of trust and love collapsing under the strain of her betrayal. "I'm not giving up," I said softly. "You did that a long time ago." Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't move to comfort her. I stayed rooted in place as she rose unsteadily to her feet and walked toward the door. "Goodbye, Brian," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Goodbye," I replied, and I meant it. When the door closed behind her, the house felt emptier than it ever had. I sat in the silence, letting the weight of the moment settle over me like a heavy blanket. In the days that followed, I began to piece my life back together. I contacted a lawyer and started the process of filing for divorce. Mark told me he was making the same decision with Megan, and while it didn't ease the pain, it made me feel less alone. The sadness lingered, deep and all-consuming, but over time, it began to fade. Amanda's choices didn't define me, and for the first time in years, I started to think about what I needed to move forward. Rebuilding wouldn't be easy, but it was a future I could claim for myself. Weeks blurred into months, and the raw chaos of emotions, anger, heartbreak, betrayal, gradually simmered into a quieter kind of acceptance. I wouldn't call it peace, not yet, but there was clarity, a steadying of the storm that had consumed me. The divorce was surprisingly straightforward. Amanda didn't contest it. When we met to sort through the logistics, dividing our belongings, arranging the sale of the house, she seemed like a shadow of herself. Her apologies were frequent but hollow, her words devoid of substance, like they were meant to soothe her own guilt more than anything else. For a time, her confession, "I needed something different," haunted me. It replayed in my mind a taunting echo. I questioned everything about myself. Was I not enough? Too ordinary? Had I missed signs of her unhappiness? But as I wrestled with those doubts, I realized something that became my anchor. Her choices weren't about me. This wasn't my fault. That realization freed me. Slowly, I began to rebuild. I stayed in the house for now, though I was considering a fresh start somewhere new. I filled the empty spaces with small but meaningful changes. Painting a wall, rearranging furniture, reclaiming the home as mine. Alan and I stayed in touch. Our shared pain created a strange bond, a connection forged in the fire of betrayal. He finalized his divorce from Megan, and though the process was brutal, I could see the relief in his eyes. "Guess we both dodged some major bullets," he said one evening as we shared beers on my back porch. "Explosive, life-ruining bullets," I replied, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I laughed. Life moved forward, as it always does. I began focusing on myself, something I'd neglected for years. I took up therapy, a step I'd once dismissed as unnecessary, and discovered how transformative it could be. One session, my therapist asked me a question that stayed with me. "What do you think you've learned from all this?" I sat with the question for a long moment before replying. "I've learned that love isn't enough. Not on its own," I said finally. She nodded, encouraging me to continue. "Love has to come with trust, respect, communication. Without those, it's just a word. I think I ignored that for too long. I wanted to believe love was enough to hold everything together. But I overlooked the small signs, the distance, the excuses. I told myself it was just a phase, that it would pass. "Do you blame yourself for not seeing it sooner?" she asked. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but I also know it wasn't my fault. I didn't cheat. I didn't lie. I did my best. And that's all you could do," she said with a small smile. That was the surprising part, realizing I wasn't broken. I was hurt, shaken, and grieving, but not broken. Amanda's choices didn't define me. They taught me. I learned I was stronger than I'd ever imagined, capable of rebuilding even when everything I'd known crumbled. I learned to let go, face the truth, no matter how painful it is. Denial only prolongs the hurt. Don't shoulder the blame for someone else's choices. Their actions are about them, not you. Grieve fully and unapologetically. Pain isn't weakness. It's part of healing. Lean on others, whether it's friends, family, or a therapist, there's no need to go through it alone. Focus on yourself. Rediscover who you are outside of the relationship and build a life that feels like yours again. Months later, I'm in a place I can only describe as better. Not perfect, but better. The pain has dulled to a distant ache, and the memories no longer have the power to shatter me. The future is still uncertain, but I'm no longer afraid to face it. As for Amanda and Megan, I'll let them go. I don't hate them, and I don't wish them ill. But I don't wish them back into my life, either. Scars remain, but they don't define me. They're markers of where I've been and how far I've come. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that made you question everything? How did you find the strength to move forward? Let me know in the comments below this post. Thanks for listening, and take care.